aliens, interstellar travelers, alien shapeshifters, star elders, latest contact files, disclosure, Sunbow Canoe. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. This is Rex Bear with Leak Project. Tonight's guests are Kelly and Kawoni Lapsaritis from PsychicSasquatch.com. Bigfoot, fact or fiction? Hoax or reality? Well, Kawoni is a social scientist that says this isn't theory but reality, with over 350 people around the world verifying his claims, working in a wide variety of fields. What is Bigfoot? How long have they been here? How are they created? Who made them? What is their purpose? How does one even make contact with a Sasquatch? Have you heard of the ant people? Sounds far out, I know. The Hopi even have ancient prophecies and cave paintings in great detail of these beings. Now, if you hear fish people or mermaids, you think of folklore, and I'm sure many of you think that they never existed. They don't exist. Well, if you've seen some of the Pope's relics, even the hat that he wears, that's a fish, essentially, there's a lot of mysticism behind it. I am agnostic. I don't know, but it certainly is fascinating to think of some of these parallels. And if you look at some of the ancient scriptures and texts, cave paintings, carvings, etc., you could definitely put a good case against there never being those types of beings. So I think it's certainly a possibility. And Kelly and Kawoni are going to share their information today with us here at the Leak Project. Kick back and enjoy the show. All right, it is a real treat to have both of you on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm at PsychicSasquatch.com. It's got a plethora of intel. And how the heck are you guys?
We're great.
Doing fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, as I told you guys off the record, I used to live out in the Northwest for a while, loved it out there, spent a lot of time in the Olympic National Rainforest, as well as this place called Capitol Forest, which is south of Olympia. I mean, it's its own entire Rhode Island almost, essentially, and I go biking out there all the time. I've never personally had an encounter with Sasquatch or Yeti. I've always been fascinated, and I've heard a lot of different theories, so can't wait to hear both of your intel on this. And let's jump right in. If you would, please, tell our audience here at Leak Project how you actually got into this type of research.
Well, I've been doing the research now for 60 years this year, and I'm started out, I read an article from a defunct magazine called Stag that my dad had bought many years ago, and there's a lot of hunting in Alaska and Africa and so on there in that magazine, but they had an article on Sasquatch, and from the very get-go, I believed that they were a people, and I became very interested. And as I started collecting degrees, I have 4 academic degrees. I continued to research. I have wilderness skills, so I've been all over the United States and southern Canada researching in the past. And in 1968, I was even investigating the Yeti in the Himalayas in the Kingdom of Nepal.
Oh, fantastic. Now, what about you, Kelly?
Well, I'm not a researcher per se, but I've been having Sasquatch experiences for several years that I've been aware of, and I was trying to put that into perspective. They were, following me, and I was aware of their presence. If I was, out in the woods, I'd be having dreams and what I perceived as telepathic communication from them. And so I was looking to put all of that into perspective because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, even though I knew what I was experiencing. So I found a friend had recommended Kawoni's name and books to me. So I looked into that, and I knew immediately that it was the truth. And so that's how I got into it, I guess, is I guess you'd say the Sasquatch brought me into it. So
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, Kawoni, I'm looking at the website once again, PsychicSasquatch.com. You've got the Psychic Sasquatch that was written and on the website. So what I am wondering is, what is Sasquatch? Now, before you answer that, I just want to say I've heard so many different theories, everything from they're extraterrestrial, they're cloned in a spaceship with the reptilians, the mantis aliens, all this other stuff. I've heard everything from their they've been around for thousands of years. They're mystical. They're from other dimensions. They remind me of Chewie from Star Wars. And I think that there's definitely something to it. But could they possibly be here? Could they have been here before we were? Or were they us before our DNA was tampered with or something? Or do you put any validity to that? And I know that's a whole bunch of questions in one.
Yeah, well, the things I'm going to share has nothing to do with theory. It's not a theory like most researchers, mainstream researchers have a theory of what Sasquatch is, and then they proceed in that direction. Where back in September of 1979, both an ET and a Sasquatch telepathically spoke to me, which was the shock of my life at the time. I wasn't afraid or anything like that. I was just a little confused that these beings were so intelligent. And at the time, I was an administrator, assistant director of a First Nations agency, an Indian agency in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I was working part-time as a hypnotherapist and had been doing a series of lectures at the Medical College of Wisconsin. So I was totally unprepared for all this psychic stuff and the ET being there. And I thought, well, I'll never tell anyone. Who's going to believe me? Why should I say anything? But it didn't end there like I thought. It was the beginning. And it's been ongoing now for 37 years that they've been telepathically talking to me, helping me, guiding me. And like the two books that I've written, the Psychic Sasquatch and their UFO Connection came out in 1998. And the Sasquatch People and their Interdimensional Connection came out in 2011. So they told me a lot of information to put in the books even. They're about 100 times more evolved than we are. For one thing, they're more human. They don't go around murdering each other. They don't start wars, and they don't destroy the environment that sustains them. So they're far more responsible, far more evolved than we are. So basically, you're asking, who are these beings? And from what they've told me, and what they're telling other contactees. And incidentally, as a social scientist, as a cryptoanthropologist, I've documented 388 percipients, witnesses, people who've had telepathic communication with the psychic Sasquatch. 17% of that 388 people had ET or UFO experiences during the encounter. So all of this has been going on, and I've been collecting data, but they are basically, they told me and other people that they were bioengineered is the word they used. That is, they were created by ETs and brought here. So when I asked them about that, they said, yes, we were seeded. And then he added, long before your people were seeded here. And that threw me when he said that, because I came from a Darwinian background in terms of organic evolution. So a lot of that has changed now because of the things they've told me here and what's happening. So they're interdimensional. They said there are 7 different races of their people worldwide. And they said the Yeti was the least evolved of all of them. And but they're interdimensional beings, and the Sherpas, even in the Himalayas, say, well, they can disappear. And the researchers that go into the Himalayas laugh at these Sherpas that it's all folklore. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? It doesn't have anything to do with folklore. They're just relating the real thing. I've seen them dematerialize 6 times in front of me. The last time was back in March 6th of this year. When
where was that at?
My wife, Kelly, and I saw one, and he deliberately showed himself and then dematerialized. Mm-hmm. So they are interdimensional. They're not monsters. The only monsters I know are the people trying to kill them.
Yes, and they the eldest elder Sasquatch named Camus has been giving messages to a dear friend named Sunbow, and he recently, just last year, he put collectively 50 chapters, 50 messages together from the Sasquatch, and it's a message for humanity that they want everybody to know. They said it's time, and we are aware and awake enough now to accept this information and to be able to, understand who they are and who we are and where we come from. And the way that it was explained is that, Earth has had a very long process of evolving, and that it began with different types of beings. There were, the reptoids, like the lizard people. There were fish people and ant people. So finally, the first human type race, or the Sasquatch, when they were seeded here, they were considered the mammal people. They were the first mammal race here on Earth. And so now us as humans, we're also a part of that mammal race. So we are more closely related to the Sasquatch than we are any other animal here on the Earth, including any kind of primate. And so they, were seeded here first to be carekeepers and caretakers of our planet. And it's all for a spiritual, conscious evolution. That's the whole reason that we're here. The whole reason that we incarnate is to continue to evolve ourselves into peaceful interspecies relations throughout all of the planets. So there were other races that were involved in the creation of all of these different beings, and some of them have different intentions than others. Some are more in service to their self for selfish purposes, or greed or control or power, just like we're seeing in the Earth now. And then there's other beings that are more in service to others, that are just wanting to help and heal the planet and humanity and our collective conscissness. And so that's what the Sasquatch were in charge of, and that's why they're here now, continuing to still help us. All of the messages that they're giving to contactees and to people is to help us evolve ourselves and our planet, so that we can, reconnect with the Council of Star Elders and live the way that we were intended to.
If a lot of this sounds science fiction, we make no apologies. This is information that was directly given, and they're giving us more information on this, what they want the world to know. And we have our own, Kelly and I own the Comanche Spirit Publishing Company, and we're publishing the works now that are coming from Sunbow, he's transcribing what Camus, the Grand Elder, is giving him. And so it's a group effort here that we're putting out exactly what they want the world to know in these books. So we're working on book 2 at the moment.
Yes, and this newest book, would you grab it? The Sasquatch Message to Humanity. We did just 3 months ago. We published it into book form. So you can get that on Amazon, the Sasquatch Message to Humanity, or you could go to psychicsasquatch.com, our website, and it's also there to read for free. It's just so lengthy that people kind of prefer to have a paperback book with them. But it's just profound information. I highly suggest it to anybody to read. And right now we're 5 chapters into the second book, the continued message to humanity from the Sasquatch. But it's more from just Camus. It's messages from other Sasquatch and different star elders, different races of beings.
If I could,
science comes out with how we evolved here, and basically using always quoting the Darwinian approach. But apparently there's many different things going on at the same time as organic evolution. So a lot of statements that science has made, and people take it that it's the truth, is not the truth. So be cautious. I know the scientists, I know who is doing the research here, and they're so far in left field, they don't have a clue what Sasquatch is. Many of them are good at analyzing tracks or hair, but wait a minute, tracks and hair don't talk. They don't share cultural information of who these beings truly are. So they think they're chasing a North American great ape, which by contactee standards, it's very laughable and ridiculous, as a matter of fact. So we're trying to say, stop the monster hunting. These are an evolved people. But if these scientists and other researchers that are out there with guns and with cameras are really threatening and pushing the forest people away, because they're not going to stand for being shot at anymore or any of that. They've been dodging bullets for a long time, and they want to help us, but people won't get near them. The reason they're around us and many of the contactees is because they said they go to people of a higher vibrational frequency, those who are have a lot of compassion, those that are empathetic and care about the planet and other people, that aren't afraid to reach out and help others. So those people are those that they like to contact, and they want to help because the other people are ignoring them or trying to kill them. So why should they try to contact them? And therefore they don't.
When I brought up in the intro about how there's been the theory of that Sasquatch is actually cloned in a spaceship with other extraterrestrials, it's funny because as far out in sci-fi as that sounds, it actually correlated a lot with what you guys were talking about. And this information that I brought up to you guys was given to me by Daryl Sims, which is actually, I mean, he used to work for the CIA. He's been involved with microchips that they found in people that are supposedly off-world. He's been abducted multiple times, and he doesn't like it. I mean, he looks at it as more of like kidnapping, so he's really against it. But he says that they're clones, the people that he's referring to, and what he said that the reason he knows that is because they don't have belly buttons, essentially. And he talked about how there was 7 different types on this one ship. He talked about the reptilians, he talked about the mantis, he talked about different types of grays. He said there's the Nordics. He said the Nordics are like the Corvettes. And I think he also said there was a Sasquatch type being. And it also kind of resonates with me when you said that the Sasquatch was on Earth before we were, because it does seem as if there is if that mystical creature is real. And I usually do my best to play devil's advocate here, but I'm just going to go along with you guys because I certainly feel some powerful energies there. You know, I mean, you're right. You don't see those beings destroying the planet. And right now you do see mankind wars destroying the planet, you know, just fracking it with all these different oil, all the oil they're trying to pull out of the earth and everything else they're doing, nuclear reactors, GMO foods, it's just horrible. It's like the Twilight Zone we live in. And I wonder if there's like multiple factions essentially. So the Sasquatch, the Yetis you refer to, now these beings, could there be good and bad just like us? You know, I mean, there's good people and there's bad people. It just really depends on that person's or that being's consciousness.
Well,
Yes.
there's a good, bad, and the indifferent everywhere in the universe. And certainly there's some that do not, they've been shot at, wounded, some of their mates have been wounded and stuff. So there is a small faction of them that are not killers or anything like that. They just don't like us because of what we've done. Clear cutting, they've complained about that and destroying forests, and all the pesticides and herbicides that we use irresponsibly, and so on. And so they do complain about that, and some of them have broken off from the main group. But basically, they'll throw rocks at people to get them out of the area, or crash and make sounds, growling and everything, because they have their families there in the forest. And you might get a bunch of guys sitting around drinking beer by a lakeside or something, and they're carrying guns and everything. So they want them out of the area. They'll just chase them out.
How do they procreate?
They're energetically, mainly. It's not something that has to be done physically like in our world. These are all just restrictions that were put on us. When the humans were created, we were programmed in certain ways to respond and react in different ways. That's why we're so full of fear and hate, and we don't like anything that's different from us. And so we don't have that natural, unconditional love within us because we are conditioned here on Earth, to fight against anything that's kind of different. So, like he said, there is the good, bad, and the indifferent, and it's not necessarily something that goes along, races. You can't say all reptilians are bad because it's all a matter of their own intentions and their own spiritual development. Because all beings, no matter where they're from or where they're going, we all choose to incarnate here to develop ourselves and to grow. Now, once we're in these physical bodies and we're here, we forget all that stuff. So that's why we see so many different people with so many different personalities. But on a soul level, we've come here to evolve ourselves, even if once we get here, we forget and aren't doing that. But the intentions behind it and the way that you live your life and the truth that you share and the way that you treat people is what matters. So some Sasquatch or some extraterrestrial beings might, largely be considered to be the good guys or the bad guys, but it's really on an individual basis. And you have to realize, too, that so many beings, they evolve and incarnate into different beings. So even though we're sitting here as humans right now, our souls, we have been Sasquatch before, we might have been mer people before, or reptilians before, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we were the bad guys or the good guys. It's the way that you choose to live in that lifetime.
Yeah.
So for the most part, the Sasquatch are good and they're here to help us, but every soul has their own karma to deal with. And it's we have our own free will on how we want to deal with that. So it's either overcome these emotions and treat things with unconditional love, or it's really easy just to lash out and hurt somebody, either physically or with your words or whatever. So they are just as physical as we are. So they can mess up just like we can.
Yeah, in back in the 80s, both ETs and the Sasquatch people would talk to me about the importance of reincarnation and karma. And they don't emphasize it as much because we adjust our way of life to understand karma and live our lives in a way that's to resolve karmic issues and to, grow and move on. I mean, even in the Bible, Christ said, whatever you sow, that's what you're going to reap. Well, that's karma, isn't it? So apparently, the Emperor Justinian took out reincarnation from the doctrine of the church that was taught by Christ. So it's just the Christians in the Western Hemisphere, in Western Europe, that basically don't believe in karma and reincarnation because it's not practiced, it's not taught. But everywhere else in the world, including the Native Americans, believed in reincarnation and so on. So again, we were being taught something that's not true or just ignored because this Sasquatch and the ETs said how very, very important it is in terms of understanding karma and living one's life by that and knowing that we can reincarnate. And they talk about it often still. And but anyhow, we feel that that's also important to bring up, because it's not all about what they eat or how big their feet are or some ridiculous thing like that. We're talking about once a person starts interacting with them telepathically and they start sharing information, once they trust you, then your whole life changes. You start applying different philosophies and different behaviorisms and so on that are very positive and spiritual that they spoke about and they shared with us and other people.
Right.
So we want to live it in order to grow and kind of weed out all the negative stuff that may be bogging us down. And they're telling us, yes, capitalism, materialism is bogging us down, bogging everyone down and pulling people in the wrong direction. And they've said that. And in a sense, I guess capitalism has become a political cancer spread all over the world, and all your big leaders of the countries want a piece of materialism and all that because of oil and minerals and all that that's going on. And it's because of capitalism right now that the planet's dying. It's just, we've polluted it. We've done everything. Everything is polluted now. The air, soil, water, food, everything. This is what the Sasquatch said, and they're disgusted with us because of that. So people need to understand that this is what we're doing is important, and it's not monster hunting, and it's not for curiosity seekers. It's for people that really want to understand the world, where we've come from, how we could evolve better into better people. As Dr. Wayne Dyer said, I want to be a better person today than I was yesterday. So we're not in competition with anyone. We're just trying to grow spiritually and get the truth out. And the truth is that there's a Bigfoot UFO connection, and they're all working together to try to help the planet by contacting people who have a higher vibrational frequency and that care.
Now, you said they were created, they were seeded by extraterrestrial life before we were. So have you ever asked them who those extraterrestrials were, and are they the same ones that seeded us, essentially?
I've never asked them which ones. I've seen 7 different races. I think Kelly here's seen about 9 different races.
That's what they said, is that you can't say it was a particular race, because it was it was more of a particular energetic group of people. So, these creators, this race of creators they could all physically look different. They could be ant people and lizard people and mer people and all of that combined. It's where they were energetically and how far that they've evolved, how, just like here on Earth, I mean, we look at our elders as being older and wiser because they've had more experiences and, more time to live and learn. And it's the same with the star elders. The longer that they've been here, and they don't have these limited lifespans like we do. Here we live for less than 100 years and we die and we're reborn and we forget everything. We don't remember who we are or anything, and we've been programmed that way. But they keep all of that knowledge. So they remember everything from the beginning and from other lifetimes, because the way that they've explained things to us is that it's very important to understand interdimensionality and probability realities and, simultaneous realities, because we're not just sitting here right now. We're also everybody who we've ever been living in those simultaneous realities right now. So, if we had lived before in ancient Egypt, and if we had lived in Lemuria, way back then, or if we were in Atlantis, those aren't necessarily past lives. They are concurrent lives, because all consciousness is one consciousness. And so we're all living simultaneous lives, even though it's really hard for us in these physical bodies to get past that, because we have such limited thinking and such limited knowledge and remembrance of who we actually are. And so that's what the Sasquatch are here to really remind us of, how material things, physical things, really don't exist. This is all just a part of our consciousness and what we've created. But even if nothing that you see here physically was here anymore, our consciousness would still exist. And so that's the important lessons that they're trying to teach us right now. And they've maintained that collective consciousness, and they've never, been, I guess you could say, bad enough to have been kicked out of the Council of Star Elders like humans have. At one time, we were connected with the star beings and with our creators, which is why we see, so many different ancient depictions and cave drawings and things like that of them being in contact with our star elders and our ancient ancestors. And there's pictures of, UFOs and aliens and all kinds of, different legends, especially oral legends.
They labeled gods, actually.
Right. But back then they were still connected with them. And especially a lot of the different Native American tribes who, never lived in this Western civilization. They were always connected to the truth, the unconditional love, and, the real way of being and understanding that they needed to evolve themselves. And so that's how they were able to survive for so long. But we have been manipulated throughout generation after generation after generation. They're subtle things, but you can certainly see it if you delve deep enough into ancient history. You can see that humans keep changing. We all of a sudden just showed up here. There was Gigantopithecus and all these different races of subhumans, and then all of a sudden humans just showed up out of nowhere. And that's because we were created that way. We were taken from, different races of beings, but the ones that want the power and control, they wanted to dumb us down, so to speak. They wanted us, they manipulated us in ways that they figured, they'll never win. They'll never figure it out. And, this is disconnecting them from their whole truth. So we'll be able to know the truth and they won't. But now people are really waking up, and people are beginning to understand and reconnect with their star elders and the Sasquatch people. So, they really are helping us as best as they can. They have to help us through our consciousness without physically intervening, which they won't do, because this is the karma that we created for ourselves. This is all on the human's plate. We have to take care of this, but they are here to help in any way that they can.
Now, also, Kawani, didn't you say that you've seen them dematerialize 6 different times, and the first experience you had, there was an ET experience as well with it?
Yes, I've seen them dematerialize 6 different times. They've touched me actually 6 different times as well, while in another dimension. So it's like we are physical dense, they're physical etheric. So when they're in a higher dimension, they can touch us or affect us, but we cannot affect them because we're too dense. So they can teleport, they can dematerialize and still be there. They can astral project. They've talked to me when I'm on a plane, 33,000 feet up. They've talked to me in the cars and stuff while we're driving along. While I'm talking to someone in a store, they said, oh, this is a good person. You should help them, and blah, blah, blah. And they'd say a few words just to encourage me because they want us to help other people. So it's like the phenomena, the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomena, is really a combination of anthropology and quantum physics with a spiritual overtone to it all. And that's sort of who they are and what they are in that sense.
Now, when you have these experiences with them and they communicate with you, especially for the skeptics out there that are going to say, well, this could just be a part of his imagination. People talk to themselves all the time. How is this any different? Maybe he's just, what do you say makes you so confident that it is a Sasquatch or an interdimensional being?
Okay, it's first of all, they've contacted me over 1,000 times in the last 37 years. So, plus I have documented 388 percipients that have also had telepathic experiences with the psychic Sasquatch. William James said it takes only one white crow to prove that all crows are not black. Now, analogously speaking, I have documented as a social scientist 388 white crows. Now, how many more white crows do I need? How many more people do I need to document to create the evidence, not the proof, but evidence that that there's a psychic Sasquatch with a UFO connection? Mm-hmm. A lot of these people, most of them are in denial. They automatically label it unscientific, and this is very scientific. In other words, I took the scientific paradigm as far as it'll go. I followed the evidence to where it led. And it objectively led to a psychic Sasquatch with a UFO connection. So,
are there like similar? Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to ask you real quick. So, are there like similarities essentially in these 388 cases that connect the dots?
Yeah, there's some slight similarities, but they're basically the same. 3 of the 388 people were physicians. There was 1 attorney. Then there were 3 scientists and 2 college professors, and then people from all walks of life. Mm-hmm. And they needed somebody to tell this to. They needed to express themselves, to get it off their chest.
And the messages are so similar. They give the same basic messages of, unconditional love and truth and, the same general messages to everybody, whether it be evolving themselves on a personal level, but it backs things up. And then, we've had some just really incredible circumstances happening. I mean, they've teleported things to us, or they've, told one person to, hey, give this person a message for us. And then we have this experience before we ever get the message. Or, they tell us that something's going to happen, and it happens. That's nearly every day. But there's lots of proofs to show that everybody else that is having these types of experiences are having the same kinds of experiences. Even Sunbow, at one time there was a Sasquatch named Bolo Bolo who was explaining the interdimensionality aspect. And Bolo Bolo told Sunbow that he was we were 2,000 miles away, or more than that, 4,000 miles away from each other. He was in Quebec and I was in Washington State. And Bolo Bolo told Sunbow telepathically that he was going to touch me. And before he could tell me that he was going to do this, I wrote to him and I said, oh my God, somebody just touched me. And so it's circumstances like that happen all the time that just kind of reaffirms that we're certainly not crazy and it's not in our head.
It all matches up.
Yeah.
And no matter who contacts us, they are saying the same thing. They're just repeating everything. And where do they get that information? And they thought that the interesting part is that a lot of these contactees would say, It wasn't until I saw you on the internet, I thought I was the only person having these experiences. I mean, so they were totally naive. And often they'd say, well, my spouse says, shut up, I don't want to talk about this, you know. And so sometimes it's a husband and sometimes it's a wife that's afraid and doesn't want to, you know, hear what their spouse had encountered. It's just too bizarre for them, too frightening. And there's really nothing to fear. We're here. We've interacted with them in the forest and at home and while traveling, and it's just a wonderful experience overall. But you can't be thinking of them in a negative way or carrying a gun and doing things of that nature that will keep them at bay or drive them away.
Have you guys seen the film? I thought this was a classic back in the day, Harry and the Hendersons.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
I love that one.
Yeah, good. Because I remember at the very end of the movie when Harry goes back to his family in the forest and they drop him off, and it's actually making the hair stand up my arms right now. It's a good vibe. They used to make movies that had good vibes. Now it's all about just weird, cut somebody's arm off and then put the arm out on some, weird clown or something like that and go show off with the purge. It's totally weird. But anyway, I'm digressing here. At the end of the film, when Harry goes back to the forest, you can see all of a sudden all of his family's there. They just come out of they just come out of nowhere. They're behind the tree. They're behind the bushes or something. And it just really left a good vibe towards that archetype. And it just makes me, I find it so sad to see so many people out there searching for Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Yeti in a way where they're like, yeah, we got our gun, we're going to get him, we're drinking down our 6-pack today, son. It's like, come on, man, what are you doing? It's like these entities out there are probably a lot more evolved than you. Why do you want to go out and shoot it so you can say you've got a nice fur coat or something like that? It's just, It's stupidity.
Definitely. It definitely is. It's just a small-minded mentality. They're not as consciously evolved, and that's who these messages for humanity are mostly for, is the people that really need to wake up. But like I said, we've been controlled and manipulated. So unfortunately, most of the human race is a part of that mentality, or was. But that's how they're helping us to evolve too. And that a lot of times people experience what they perceive as a scary situation, and it wasn't really meant to scare them. It's just because they're so full of fear, but that's up to them to see if they want to look at that as fear and as something to be afraid of and something now to hunt down and kill because I don't understand it, or they could try to learn from it and discover what it is. And, so it's free will. It's up to every individual to take things in the direction that they want it to go in.
Yeah, a lot of mainstream researchers that are quite naive have told the coordinators of these organizations that they won't speak from now on if they have me as a speaker, because what I do in terms of a psychic Sasquatch and all that has nothing to do with the phenomena. This is what they're saying, that what I do doesn't have anything to do with Sasquatch, when the thing is, it has everything to do with it. It's the whole picture. It's the whole deal. And so what if it sounds far out? In fact, they said, one researcher told the coordinator, I don't think I want to speak if Kiwoni does, because he's too far out. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they're not far out enough, because they failed in everything they've done in their research, because they're driving the Sasquatch away. We don't go hunting or looking for them. We know the areas. They tell us really to go to the areas so they can interact with us more physically. So we're not looking for them. They found us, and they're around us all the time, 24/7. So we don't butt heads with these people who are ignorant and are on to their thing is, let's chase them down and shoot them up. And so we're not into that, and therefore I don't interact with these people, these other researchers, because we don't have anything in common. They're too far in left field in terms of their negativity. And I wish them well, and I hope that some of what we say can affect them in a positive way. And we want to demonsterize the phenomena. And yet I was out in Oklahoma speaking last month, and right
What
after
part?
I got through the Hanobia.
What's that by?
Bigfoot conference.
I think the town's called Hanobia.
Yeah, it's
Like,
a town.
what's it close to? If you were to say by a bigger city, I'm just wondering.
I'm not sure. It's not too far from Antlers.
Might be. Is it close to Tulsa?
No.
Okay,
No.
not close to Tulsa.
So more like southeastern part.
Yes.
Okay.
It's southeast.
And that's a pretty hot spot then for Sasquatch.
Yeah, it's the Kaimishi Wilderness. 3 years in a row I was out there, spent up to 3 weeks actually interacting with them and befriending a whole group out there. So, but it's interesting how at the conference, as soon as you got a speaker that wants to talk about monster hunting and shooting them up, the whole place is packed. You talk about the psychic Sasquatch, there's far less people. A lot of people don't want to know the truth. They think they've already discovered it, and it's their own naivety, they've tricked themselves into believing that they're after some monster.
Well, the problem is also, and I really appreciate what you're saying, but I do feel at the same time, you've got those people out there that have heard everything in the book. They've been lied to so many times before, and they're just meat and potatoes kind of people because that's how they think, that's how they work. So they want the tangible evidence. And if somebody tells them that it's just a psychic experience, to them, they just can't compute. And I don't think that it's good sometimes to just automatically say, well, that person is, not at the level that I am. And maybe that's true, but at the same time, people just think differently. And there's so many people that have been hoodwinked and so many charlatans out there. It's tough to decipher from the truth, and you really just kind of have to go with your gut sometimes. And oftentimes maybe people like that aren't supposed to know yet, maybe because they're just not at that level. But wouldn't it be cool if you guys could actually work something out with the Yetis or the Sasquatch or one of these interdimensional beings and say, look, why don't you communicate with the people that actually are causing all the pain, all the suffering at these higher levels? Maybe some defense contractor that makes $1 billion a quarter off of selling missiles to some offshore interest or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there, because wouldn't it be more valuable? And I'm just asking questions, you guys, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. Wouldn't it be just amazing if they could interact with some of these world leaders as well and people that are psychopaths? Do you think that it would make a connection with them and then be like, well, maybe I don't want to make profit off of killing people anymore. Maybe I do want to look for an alternative energy source and be a good change to the environment?
It would be great if they could, but the problem is that those people aren't at the evolution stage. They're not evolved enough to accept or understand if they were trying to communicate with them.
Fear, they're into fear.
Right. It's a fear of anything spiritual or metaphysical. And so even if the Sasquatch were to come and talk to them, they wouldn't believe it. If they had a dream about them, or if they had some brilliant, revolution or something that was inspired by the Sasquatch, or, they can appear in all kinds of different ways interdimensionally, or they might, put something physical in your lap, or they might come as a whirlwind, or, whispers, or whatever it might be. But to the people that are not accepting of that now, they won't get it. They're not going to see it. It's like an optical illusion in a sense. Some people can see them and some people can't. And the further down the spiral, so to speak, that some people are, the more that they are in service to self, and the more greed that they have, the less they're going to be able to feel these experiences.
Yeah, they've helped us and done a lot of healing for our family. Way back, the ETs came when I had a ruptured disc, and I'm totally unable to walk. In fact, I could barely move. And on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of pain, 10 being the worst, my pain was a 10.5. It was that bad, and they wanted to do experimental surgery on me, and I said no. And so I telepathed to this spaceship that kept coming through the area. This is in Oregon, 1987, and they came and healed me. I got up and walked the next day, totally pain-free. It was just an absolute shock to me. And the shocking part is, a couple of weeks later, because they said I probably would never walk again unless I had this surgery, which meant that I probably, if they messed up, I wouldn't be able to walk for sure. But I was on my way to the bank on a late Friday to go to the bank before it closed, and there were no ATMs back then. And I was jogging down the street to make sure I got to the bank in time. I had 7 minutes before it closed, and a doctor that told me that, I was in a wheelchair all the time, and when I went to see him, and he saw me running down the street, and he was crossing the street, and I'm standing on the corner, and he pointed to my legs, and his mouth kept going up and down, and he was patting his bald head, but nothing was coming out. He was just in a state of shock seeing me like that. And I smiled and said, "Have a nice day, doctor," and jogged across the street to the bank. So 2012, I had a brain tumor. They dissolved that. the Sasquatch people are very, very powerful in healing and helping people, as long as they just don't do it at random. But if you're working with them as we are and doing projects and devoting our lives to the truth, then they do reach out and help us. And they've helped Kelly and my wife, and they even play with our 6-year-old son.
Right, because they want to communicate and help people that have good intentions, people that want to help themselves and help humanity. And unfortunately, most leaders of the world don't have those intentions. So if they were to approach them, they would probably shoot them, out of not understanding what was going on.
Martial law, get them! Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I really appreciate the approach that you're both bringing to the table. It's nice to hear words of encouragement and unconditional love, like you said. It would be fantastic to actually meet a Sasquatch or a Yeti someday. I'm doing a countrywide tour here, and I'm definitely going to be going to the Northwest, through Oklahoma, Missouri, and several hot spots. So who knows? Maybe I'll have an opportunity to meet one and say hello. Before we close out, are there any things that I should have brought up or asked about that you'd like to share with us? And also want to thank you so much for coming on, psychicsasquatch.com.
Yeah. Yes, there's more information, a tremendous amount of information on the dynamics of how the Sasquatch operate in my 2 books, which you can go to the www.sasquatchpeople.com and also psychicsasquatch.com for more information. And if you want the latest book, of which the 3 of us have put our energy into, that Sunbow transcribed, which is The Sasquatch Message to Humanity, you can go on Amazon.com and plug that in, and you'd be able to get a copy for $10.
Mm-hmm. And we really recommend that book, his books as well, but especially the newest book has some really important messages in it, and we're at a really critical time right now, and it's important for that message to get out there, and it can be read for free as well at both of those websites if you didn't want to purchase the book. Like I said, it's a long read. It's kind of hard to follow along online, which is why we published it, but it's highly recommended. Also, this last September, we had our first annual Spiritual and Psychic Sasquatch Conference here in Chewelah, Washington, and it was a wonderful success, just wonderful energy. Everybody had really beautiful experiences, and it was like a big family reunion, and there were Sasquatch by the thousands there with us. And we plan to have one again this year here in Chewelah, Washington on September 1st through the 3rd, 2017.
Yes, and we had people coming from Russia, Norway, Australia, England, Canada.
All over the U.S.
Yeah, all over the U.S. And there's people wanting to come now more from Europe and from New Zealand and Japan and so forth, now that they found out that even people who are camped out at the tiny wilderness campus where we had the conference, they were seeing Sasquatch walking at the edge of the woods even. And they've talked to a lot of people that were just attending the conference. So this is really a different conference. Not a lot of baloney with the monster hunters and what kind of gun to use and that kind of stuff. Sorry, none of that at our conference. Just a lot of love, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of sharing of real important information. And it was just wonderful. It's something that's I've never experienced so many people, like you've known them forever and you just met them kind of thing, because they come from the same space we come from, believing and understanding and accepting the Sasquatch people for who they are and their love and their message.
Thank you so much. PsychicSasquatch.com. Also check out LeakProject.com and YouTube.com/clandestine Time Lord. Have a fantastic day, everybody, and be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Good night. Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch, reptilians, ant people, mermaids, fish fiends, interstellar travelers, alien shapeshifters, star elders, latest contact files, disclosure, Sunbow Canoe. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. This is Rex Bear with Leak Project. Tonight's guests are Kelly and Kawoni Lapsaritis from PsychicSasquatch.com. Bigfoot, fact or fiction? Hoax or reality? Well, Kawoni is a social scientist that says this isn't theory but reality, with over 350 people around the world verifying his claims, working in a wide variety of fields. What is Bigfoot? How long have they been here? How are they created? Who made them? What is their purpose? How does one even make contact with a Sasquatch? Have you heard of the ant people? Sounds far out, I know. The Hopi even have ancient prophecies and cave paintings in great detail of these beings. Now, if you hear fish people or mermaids, you think of folklore, and I'm sure many of you think that they never existed, they don't exist. Well, if you've seen some of the Pope's relics, even the hat that he wears, that's a fish, essentially, there's a lot of mysticism behind it. I am agnostic, I don't know, but it certainly is fascinating to think of some of these parallels. And if you look at some of the ancient scriptures and texts, cave paintings, carvings, etc., you could definitely put a good case against there never being those types of beings. So I think it's certainly a possibility. And Kelly and Kawoni are going to share their information today with us here at the Leak Project. Kick back and enjoy the show. All right, it is a real treat to have both of you on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm at psychicsasquatch.com. It's got a plethora of intel. And how the heck are you guys?
We're great.
Doing fine.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, as I told you guys off the record, I used to live out in the Northwest for a while, loved it out there, spent a lot of time in the Olympic National Rainforest, as well as this place called Capitol Forest, which is south of Olympia. I mean, it's its own entire Rhode Island almost, essentially, and I go biking out there all the time. I've never personally had an encounter with Sasquatch or Yeti. I've always been fascinated, and I've heard a lot of different theories, so can't wait to hear both of your intel on this. And let's jump right in. If you would, please, tell our audience here at Leak Project how you actually got into this type of research.
Well, I've been doing the research now for 60 years this year, and I'm started out, I read an article from a defunct magazine called Stag that my dad had bought many years ago, and there's a lot of hunting in Alaska and Africa and so on there in that magazine, but they had an article on Sasquatch, and from the very get-go, I believed that they were a people, and I became very interested. And as I started collecting degrees, I have 4 academic degrees. I continued to research. I have wilderness skills, so I've been all over the United States and southern Canada researching in the past. And in 1968, I was even investigating the Yeti in the Himalayas in the Kingdom of Nepal.
Oh, fantastic. Now, what about you, Kelly?
Well, I'm not a researcher per se, but I've been having Sasquatch experiences for several years that I've been aware of, and I was trying to put that into perspective. They were, following me, and I was aware of their presence. If I was, out in the woods, I'd be having dreams and what I perceived as telepathic communication from them. And so I was looking to put all of that into perspective because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, even though I knew what I was experiencing. So I found a friend had recommended Kawoni's name and books to me. So I looked into that, and I knew immediately that it was the truth. And so that's how I got into it, I guess, is I guess you'd say the Sasquatch brought me into it. So
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, Kawoni, I'm looking at the website once again, psychicsasquatch.com. You've got the Psychic Sasquatch that was written and on the website. So what I am wondering is, what is Sasquatch? Now, before you answer that, I just want to say I've heard so many different theories, everything from they're extraterrestrial, they're cloned in a spaceship with the reptilians, the mantis aliens, all this other stuff. I've heard everything from they've been around for thousands of years. They're mystical. They're from other dimensions. They remind me of Chewie from Star Wars. And I think that there's definitely something to it. But could they possibly be here? Could they have been here before we were? Or were they us before our DNA was tampered with or something? Or do you put any validity to that? And I know that's a whole bunch of questions in one.
Yeah, well, the things I'm going to share has nothing to do with theory. It's not a theory like most researchers, mainstream researchers have a theory of what Sasquatch is, and then they proceed in that direction. Where back in September of 1979, both an ET and a Sasquatch telepathically spoke to me, which was the shock of my life at the time. I wasn't afraid or anything like that. I was just a little confused that these beings were so intelligent. And at the time, I was an administrator, assistant director of a First Nations agency, an Indian agency in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I was working part-time as a hypnotherapist and had been doing a series of lectures at the Medical College of Wisconsin. So I was totally unprepared for all this psychic stuff and the an ET being there. And I thought, well, I'll never tell anyone. Who's going to believe me? Why should I say anything? But it didn't end there like I thought. It was the beginning. And it's been ongoing now for 37 years that they've been telepathically talking to me, helping me, guiding me. And like the two books that I've written, the Psychic Sasquatch and their UFO Connection came out in 1998. And the Sasquatch People and their Interdimensional Connection came out in 2011. So they told me a lot of information to put in the books even. They're about 100 times more evolved than we are. For one thing, they're more human. They don't go around murdering each other. They don't start wars, and they don't destroy the environment that sustains them. So they're far more responsible, far more evolved than we are. So basically, you're asking, who are these beings?